Alright guys, we've got a bunch of new Nintendo Switch 2 information and potential leaks to go over. New Nintendo Switch 2 games that could be announced coming up here for the platform. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. We're going to start off with a new rumor from Nash Weedle over on Twitter. He talked about his leak express when it comes to Remedy and what we could be seeing on the Nintendo Switch 2. So Remedy Entertainment, they're the ones who deal with games like Max Payne and Alan Wake, and it does seem like, according to him, that Max Payne 1 and 2 remake and Alan Wake 2 will be heading over to the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, if you look at this, obviously you got to take it with a grain of salt at this point. Nash Weedle has been wrong on a number of things. He's gotten some things right, he's gotten a number of things wrong, so don't take it as it's happening 100%. But as someone who's been digging around and kind of looking myself, and also just looking at the environment of the gaming industry and what Remedy did on the Nintendo Switch 1, or at least what they tried to do, I would be more inclined to believe that yes, Max Payne, Alan Wake, and also maybe even Control gets a native Nintendo Switch 2 version, just because with Alan Wake, there was Alan Wake on the Nintendo Switch 1. Now, it launched in super rough shape, but then they ended up patching it and it got a little bit better, and I think it even runs much better if you play Alan Wake on the Nintendo Switch 2, Alan Wake Remastered on the Switch 2. I think it's even better if you do that. If you look at what happened with Control, they had a cloud version of that game and they did their best, but it's a cloud version overall. So they were even trying to support the Nintendo Switch 1 with games like Control and Alan Wake. So I would not be surprised if Max Payne and Alan Wake does come over native to the Nintendo Switch 2. And you also have to look at it this way, and I'll probably have a separate video talking about this. The decline of the Xbox Series puts a lot of these companies in a little bit more of a bind, because you used to be able to rely upon the sales of Microsoft's system overall, at least having 50, 60 million units the last couple generations, but that has not been the case this generation with the Xbox Series overall. The Nintendo Switch 2 is an emerging system at this point, and it looks like it's going to sell well when it comes down to it. So you have to start planning your games, and you have to start planning for that dip when it comes to what we saw with the Xbox Series. And even if you look at it, PlayStation 5 still doing incredible, people still buying tons of games on there, but it is a couple million behind the PlayStation 4 launch aligned. So something has to take up that extra slack where there's deficiencies when it comes to overall sales numbers, and I think the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be inserted into that for many of these companies. Now, I have played Remedy's games for many years now. I've played Control, I've played Max Payne, I've played Alan Wake. I have not got a chance play Alan Wake 2 just yet, but if it does come over to the Nintendo Switch 2, I think it could be pretty cool. Alan Wake 2 got nominated for a lot of Game of the Year stuff, and I think that it would be pretty cool if Nintendo Switch 2 fans or Nintendo fans got a chance to play it, because Alan Wake 1 is on the system and people did enjoy that once they patched it up or playing it on the Nintendo Switch 2. And when it comes to Max Payne, I did play those games back in the day. I'm not as big of a Max Payne fan when it comes to that. I think I'd probably say out of Control, Max Payne, and Alan Wake, I think maybe I like Alan Wake the most out of those games. But once again, it's one of those things where, hey, look, if they can bring over more games, especially if they do a remake of Max Payne 1 and 2 and it ends up being a really good remake of it, I'm down for that. I'm down to give Max Payne another shot, because those games were so big in like the early 2000s. People loved it. That was like the invention of bullet time for the most part. You do the jump and it slows down and all that. So that was something that my friends and I played quite a bit back in the day. So if they can bring those over too as well, that would be great. So what do you guys think about these potential leaks for the Nintendo Switch 2 going on here? Let me know in the comment section below. But before we get into the next topic, please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, and click that notification bell to get my videos as soon as they drop. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this next thing that's probably going to help out when it comes to Alan Wake or Control or Max Payne or any of these games, and that's a little bit of new details on exactly how DLSS works on the Nintendo Switch 2. And I watched this video from Digital Foundry, and it's a lot of technical mumbo jumbo, but let's go ahead and get into it here. So Digital Foundry has conducted a deep dive on the DLSS functionality for the Nintendo Switch 2, and they got a few different things that they talked about. So for those that are unaware, DLSS essentially allows games to achieve higher resolution that wouldn't normally be possible, so sharper clarity from what you see. For example, Street Fighter 6 runs at a fixed native 960 by 540 resolution when docked, but can ultimately output at 1080p. Based on Digital Foundry's investigation, it looks like there are two types of DLSS featured on the Nintendo Switch 2. The first type, that is most similar to the PC DLSS CNN model, it can be seen in Cyberpunk 2077. The second, which is newer, is a less effective variant used by games like The Tourist. While the second version can achieve sharper resolution than CNN, on movement it can almost seem like it's turning off and not working. Apparently the second type/model has half the frame time cost according to a developer. Now check out this model here. This is a breakdown between Type 1 and Type 2 overall, where one of them, Type 1, 1080p examples only, Type 2 you got 4K overall, and kind of like what happens on each one. So here's the thing with this, and this is why I think that this is really good that it offers these both types of models. Depending on what type of game you're having, or the requirement cost, or the intensity, or what they're doing, how demanding the game is, you can kind of pick and choose what you want to do and when you want to do that. Having DLSS is going to be not necessarily a magic bullet overall that gets everything done, but it's going to be a massive help with bigger games going forward. And we've already seen it when it comes to games like Star Wars Outlaws or Cyberpunk 2077 or Street Fighter 6. These are all big games that honestly there's no chance that they come to the Nintendo Switch 1, but with the Nintendo Switch 2, the jump in power, and with DLSS, you can make things punch above its weight. The Switch 2 can punch above its weight with this excellent form of that. That's way better than FSR and way better than the upscaling techniques that we had before, even the Nintendo Switch 1 had and other platforms. So I love the fact that DLSS has been implemented in this type of way, and I think that it's going to help a lot of games get way better results than what we would normally get. And this is pretty much, I would say, tech wizardry from Nintendo and Nvidia to get this going on the size of the system that the Nintendo Switch 2 is. It's not like we're talking about a big PC here or a PlayStation 5 or something like that, right? We're talking about a small hybrid system with a dock. So this is definitely a good thing. I think that having these options is great, and who knows, maybe it even evolves and it updates and it even gets a little bit better between Type 1 and Type 2 as we go forward and as developers get more comfortable with the system and using this. I still think, even if you look at some of the big games that have come out that have been incredible, Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza and some other big games, they're not using the system to the utmost when it comes to DLSS. Nintendo still hasn't really implemented that with those big games. So I do feel that in the future, Nintendo will implement those more and get more and more comfortable, as other developers have already started. Star Wars Outlaws was probably the best example that we have when it comes to using DLSS and actually having it to where it's like, oh wow, they're using those tensor cores, they're using it pretty well. So very good here, definitely a promising start when it comes to Nintendo Switch 2 and what they're doing with DLSS, and I can't wait to see what other companies bring over their bigger games that people would have never thought could come to a hybrid platform and run and look good, and they ultimately end up doing, like Star Wars Outlaws has done, and of course Cyberpunk 2077, Street Fighter, and more. So what do you guys think about this when it comes to these two type variants of NVIDIA DLSS? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the next topic here. We've got Atlas and what's happening with Persona 3 Reload. We actually got a lot to talk about this because there were a lot of people that were upset that Persona 3 Reload did not come to the Nintendo Switch 1, but Atlas has a excuse for that overall and why it didn't. They actually explained. Plus, they also talked about the female MC and why that's not happening. So many people really want that female MC from Persona 3 Portable. So let's get into all of this here. In a recent interview, they did talk about it. And here was the question that was posed first. Could you tell us the background behind the development of the Switch 2 version? And here was what Mr. Wada from Persona had to say. We've had the desire to bring it to Nintendo hardware from the start, but simultaneous development was simply too difficult at the time. After the Switch 2 was announced, we thought we want to get our hands on development kits as soon as possible and bring this to those who want to play on Switch 2, and that's when we started moving forward. Here's the next question. Why did you choose to make it exclusively for Switch 2? So why wasn't it on Switch 1 as well? Here's what Wada had to say. The main reason is simple. We wanted to deliver the game to everyone as soon as possible. We aimed to release it as fast as we could without any significant delay from the other versions. We considered releasing it for both the Switch and Switch 2, but we realized that doing so would delay the release by at least a year more than originally planned. Komori also added in this: when we tested it on Switch, we realized that a direct port would be challenging performance-wise. To achieve the same comfortable controls and graphics that match the hardware, we would have to completely rebuild the UI and art assets. That would push the release back at least a year. Wada chimed in by saying, so the desire to deliver the game as quickly as possible, we made the decision to focus exclusively on Switch 2. Originally, we were planning for a release early next year, but thanks to smooth development progress, we were able to release it this October. We were really happy to be able to release it earlier than originally planned. So let's talk about this before we get into the whole female MC thing. I think that it's good that they want to make sure that the quality is upheld and all of that. But if you're looking at it overall, I don't think it necessarily would have been that bad if they decided to delay it out to next year and have it on both platforms, or even if they, I would say, get the Nintendo Switch 2 version running at 60 frames per second instead of 30 frames per second, which I still think that there should be a 60 frames per second mode on Persona 3 Reload. Like, the game obviously looks great, it's Unreal Engine and all of that, but at the same time, like, I still feel that there should be a 60 FPS mode. But I do understand why they opted to do that, because look, the Nintendo Switch 1, obviously it's going to take a lot of work, it's going to take a lot more money, and how much would you sell on there? And plus, would that take away from what you're doing with the Nintendo Switch 2 version? Maybe. So I get it. Like, I know that there's a lot of people that feel differently when it comes down to that, but I think that people would have just loved to see a bit more effort on the Nintendo Switch 2 version and getting that to 60 FPS, because I think that that game overall probably should run at 60 FPS if they took a bit more time. But we don't know what's planned for next year. I'm pretty sure that Atlus has a lot of stuff cooking for next year, and I think that the real reason that they're not necessarily talked about here, or more like another side reason that they didn't reveal, was because they've got other stuff cooking for the Nintendo Switch 2 next year, and they didn't want to jumble up those releases. There could be something with Shin Megami Tensei. We got to wait and see for that. There could be other games that are coming out. Atlus and Sega have been really announcing and putting out a lot of Nintendo Switch 2 games, so I'm guessing that there's also something else big coming out next year, or a number of titles, and they don't want that to interfere with what they're doing next year as well. So that's interesting there. But let's talk about some more Persona 3 Reload stuff and how Persona 3 Reload will not add the Persona 3 Portable's female lead, as it's just too timely and costly. So in the same interview, Mr. Wada talked about this, and he said it's a no-go on that one. Quote, I have to say that the possibility is not there. Of course, we were also considering the possibility of a female protagonist, but we realized that it would take several times more time and cost than Episode Aegis, so we decided it wasn't realistic. We also have a mission to work on a variety of other new things. If you ask us what we left undone with Persona 3, it would be this matter. But we hope you will understand that the staff is working together on various initiatives so that you can look forward to future developments. So this is the interesting thing here, and Persona 3 Reload comes out on October 23rd on the Nintendo Switch 2. So this is the thing here. He talked about this, and I kind of alluded to it, where they are working on a variety of other things, and it just tapped out their resources, it seems. Atlus has always been a very, I would say, cautious developer when it comes to what they greenlight, what they do, because game development is long and it is difficult. The games that they make are very intricate. There's a lot of lines, there's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of text, there's a lot of debugging, there's a lot of stuff with what Atlus does overall. And yes, adding the female protagonist would be great, and I wish that they actually did that overall. That would be super cool. I'd still like them to add it, but yes, it probably would be pretty pricey overall to add that in, considering everything that you'd have to do to change up the game. I mean, you almost have to kind of make it again in some sense. So I understand, but it still would have been super cool if they were able to add that. But yeah, they've got a lot of other stuff that they're working on that they haven't announced yet, that they are probably going to be announcing, whether it's at Nintendo Directs or it's going to be at different showcases or just randomly overall. So there's a lot of cool content to look forward to, and they're putting their resources into some of these other things here too. So we'll see what happens once again. So what do you guys think about everything that we talked about here, from the different potential leaks to the new details on DLSS, and of course what Atlus had to say here with Persona 3 Reload on the Nintendo Switch 2? Plan on picking up the game or not? Let me know about all of that in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.